One of the historic achievements of the 20th century is genocide, since there were a lot of conflicts that ended up in death and carnage. Conflicts that will impact the direction of the world moving forward. Genocide is considered a crime against humanity by the United Nations and the Declarations of Human Rights, which are the rights all humans have simply for being human. During genocide, there are a lot of human rights that are being violated. Some that stand out are the right to no torture or inhuman treatment, the right to no discrimination, and the right to live, among others. The United Nations is an organization that was created to endorse world peace and prevent international conflicts. They lacked a military force, but instead they got the Blue Helmets, which are volunteer peacekeeping troops that can be deployed only with a mandate, which is a permit that allows them to be deployed in international grounds, since the international borders need to be respected. The term of genocide that was agreed upon by the Convention on the Prevention and Punishment of the Crime of Genocide in 1948 states as follows: a mass murder with the intention of erasing an ethnic group, which in most cases is a minority, being erased by a majority, by causing physical and or psychological harm, is and will be considered a crime of genocide. On the other hand, when hunger is forced upon by a government by negligence, like the case of Venezuela, will not be considered as genocide. The problem with the Declaration of Human Rights is that its rights and obligations are poorly defined, allowing governments to operate with total liberty from these obligations. A recent example of this is the Uyghur genocide in China, where countries like the US accused China of committing genocide, and others like Egypt sided with China with the position that China is defending its country from extremist ideas that had threatened national security in the past. With all that in mind, it's time to analyze the Rwandan genocide, a conflict between two ethnic groups that ended up with around 1 million deaths. Let's analyze how the human rights were violated and how the United Nations was involved during this conflict, all with the purpose of learning and growing from the past. In 1994, the conflict between Tutsi and Hutu ethnicities broke into an uncontrollable massacre, where the tensions and hate between the two groups broke the limit, where husbands killed their own wives, neighbors murdered neighbors, and even children were forced to carry weapons and take human lives. The killing spree lasted for 100 days. During the interval of time, the Blue Helmets arrived at the capital city of Kigali. They were around 200 soldiers from the UN, a number experts criticize as insufficient, since they estimate that around 2,000 soldiers, which the UN had, could have stopped the conflict. The other problem that the Blue Helmets ran into was that they didn't count with a mandate, which limited their actions to extract international tourists that were stranded in Rwanda, with little to no force or resistance, which means that they were allowed to take a life, costing some of the Blue Helmets' lives in the process. There were a lot of signs that pointed to genocide, mainly the propaganda that was used to get rid of the Tutsi ethnic group, to get rid of the cockroaches. These hate speeches inspired atrocious actions in the country, and with the added sign of the military arming civilians with the intent of increasing their numbers, turned the conflict into a massacre, one that you could see from miles away. The inefficiency of the UN during this conflict is heavily criticized, since not so few years ago, the Convention on the Prevention and Punishment of the Crime of Genocide was created, just after the end of World War II in 1948. This failure in the African territory of Rwanda was forced a 5-point action plan for the prevention of genocide in the year 2004. This 5-point action plan states the following: prevention of armed conflict, via addressing the causes of the conflict, defend the rights of the minorities, and pay attention to the environment. Look and stop for hatred, intolerance, and discrimination. Second point, endorse protection to civilians in armed conflicts, via providing help from the UN's peacekeeping forces, keeping civilians from violence in the main priority. Third point, ending impunity, via endorsing justice and punishment to those who participate in the act of genocide, and for those who weaponize hate and intolerance to harm others. 4. Early and clear warnings, via paying attention to civil society groups' reports and accept the possibility of genocide. Gather as much information as possible in order to act accordingly to the situation. 5. And last point, swift and decision action. We are not lacking the political will to act, since humanity must stand and defend itself from crimes against humanity. After the Rwandan conflict, the country fell into poverty and insecurity. The country has struggled to move forward from the past and its national conflicts. Regardless, the country today, in 2021, has achieved technological and economic advances, as well as healthcare improvements. In Rwanda, it is prohibited to speak about ethnicity thanks to the fear and unresolved conflicts that might re-spark the ethnic tensions once more, which is something every Rwandan fears to date. Genocide has stained human history and its achievements, but even from the darkest of days, from the darkest of conflicts, we must learn of how to be a more harmonic world. From genocide, we learn that we must respect and tolerate our differences, that we must not allow tensions to grow from past conflicts, and that we must learn to be compassionate and show forgiveness. Otherwise, we will just be accumulating hate, and that will let us become a ticking bomb that will detonate into deadlier conflicts. We need to be better. The Declaration of Human Rights was created with the intention of bringing peace in the most peaceful ways, by finding common ground between international actors that are so similar yet so different thanks to their distinct. The creation of the human rights and the United Nations are an achievement of the 20th century on its own. Yet, we must not turn a blind eye to the flaws both the Declaration and the international organization has shown in the past, thus creating the need to upgrade and learning from the mistakes. So we need to look forward with an eye aim at the future. Yet we must not forget about the past, since history is simply our best teacher.